Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher. Welcome to the Sweetwater Minute. This time on the Sweetwater Minute, we have a special guest. Stu Hamm is here.
How are you, man?
Thanks for coming in.
My pleasure.
Appreciate you being here.
Second time here?
Yeah.
And things are looking great, man. What an awesome place to play. What
That's
a great,
incredible, isn't it?
great thing you guys got going on here. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, you did the clinic last night for Washburn.
I did. It was great. It was packed. The rig sounded great. The good questions.
Right.
So it's a pleasure to be here.
And you got a new signature bass that I want to talk with you about. But let's jump back a little bit. You were born in New Orleans.
I was born in New Orleans.
You grew up not far from here, right?
Not too bad. Yeah, my father was a musicologist, and he was teaching at Tulane University,
Mm-hmm.
and then he got a job at the University of Illinois.
Okay.
So I spent most of my upbringing in Champaign, Illinois,
Right.
which is, as I said last night, the land of opportunity if you're a tractor. But it was a great place to grow up. It was really actually very vibrant musical society. My friend my dad was a poker playing buddy of John Cage's, and there was a real scene of like avant-garde classical music with Bruno Nettle and John Cage and Nam June Paik there.
Right.
And my oldest brother played guitar, and so I saw Return to Forever when they were an acoustic group, and at the Assembly Hall I saw the Stones and Jethro Tull and Sun Ra, and
Nice.
everyone came through, and as well as all the classical stuff and operas that my mother was in, and it was a great place to grow up and a pretty vibrant place artistically.
Right. So when did you start playing bass? What drew you into that instrument?
Well, I mean, coming from a family of musicians, I played music my whole life, starting with I think I got a drum set when I was like 3.
Mm-hmm.
That's from the Sears catalog with a little sailboat on the cover.
Awesome.
And my parents used to bring me out at drunken, collegiate cocktail parties and make me play for their colleagues. And then I played piano, and I played flute, and I played, violin for like about a week.
Mm-hmm.
And then, the cool thing was, again, in Illinois, the school music programs were so strong, and I'm sure they still are. And in fact, if I hadn't left Illinois, I probably would have ended up at Indiana State in the jazz band program.
Mm-hmm.
But not only marching band, but the stage band programs in Illinois was really competitive.
Right.
And the high school I went to for 1 year, Champaign Central, was perennial state champions.
Mm-hmm.
And so much so in the middle school there were 3 different levels. They called it stage band.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of stories. That's one story. Also, I was a big Danny Bonaducci fan.
Right.
Being a pudgy red-haired geek, and he was kind of the role model for those people. And a bass player a rock band set up in Eisner Park one day when I was about 10, and the bass player had a red bass with a white curly cord playing through one of those custom amps with the Naugahyde sides and the chrome pearl balls.
Right.
And so I saw a guy playing bass. I thought it was really cool, and I really did want to be in the high school band.
Mm-hmm.
So in 1973 for Christmas, I got my first bass. It was a red one, and a book called Mel Bay's Easy Bass Method.
Sure.
And learned really primarily by playing in the big bands and playing upright bass and playing pretty complicated odd time signature big band charts.
Mm-hmm.
Every year, someone from the University of Illinois that had a great jazz band program, they would have one of their senior members write a piece for us to play at the competitions at Oaklawn and stuff.
Right.
And it was actually quite a while before I played in a rock band. And I remember the first song that I ever played was, of course, Riding the Storm Out.
Of course.
Being from back there.
In the Midwest, yeah.
And the second song that I ever played was Whipping Post,
Sure.
which was great, which was in 11, and which prepared me for all the odd time nonsense I ended up playing with Vi and all
Right.
the ex-Zappa guys. But what a much different thing coming from a totally schooled environment to playing music from that way. And I remember the first gig I did, I was filling in for a bass player, and we played a dance at Centennial Junior High School. And the regular bass player couldn't make it, but he came in and sat in for a song, and he smoked me.
Yeah.
And I remember just feeling this like Fred Flintstone when he'd get embarrassed and he'd shrink, walk out. And, there are a lot of different ways to get motivations. But I remember after that guy smoked me, I think it's amazing. I remember he played the bass solo from a Marshall Tucker song called 24 Hours at a Time off the live record that has some chordal stuff in it. And that really motivated me to seek out, I'm going to show him.
Right.
Kind of thing.
Right.
But it was a wonderful place to grow up. And then when I moved to Vermont, when my father got the gig at Dartmouth College, I went from a mega 5,000 enrollment 4-year high school in Champaign Central to a graduating class of like 40 people up there in New Hampshire and Vermont. And that they didn't have much of a school band program, so I started playing in frat bands and top 40 bands and bars and stuff like that.
Sure.
It was great.
Yeah. So then you went to Berkeley from there.
Then I went to Berkeley College of Music when I was 1978. And the first day I was there, I realized there were 2 other bass players on the same floor. One was a guy by the name of Baron Brown, who plays with Jean-Luc Ponty and Vital Information, and the other was Victor Bailey, who went on to play with Weather Report. So for a white kid like me from the Midwest of New England, just being around all these amazing musicians from around the world. And the second week I was there, I met Steve Vai, and we had a band. And then after a year at Berkeley, Steve, I played on his audition tapes for Zappa, and he moved to California, and I went on the road with an Elvis Presley impersonator for a couple of years, and did that for a while. Moved back to Boston, worked on Boylston Street, and then I got a call from Steve one day, and it's one of those great things. And he said, "Look, I'm doing this record. I quit Zappa's band. Do you want to come out to California?" And so I got in a bus and flew to California, and we did the Flexible record.
Right. So there you were.
There I was.
And through Steve, you connected with Joe Satriani.
Well, what happened was I was playing in Steve Vai's band, and then he replaced Yngwie Malmsteen in Alcatraz, right, with Graham Bonnet, one of the loudest bands I ever heard. And so then I had to get a gig, and I was living in L.A. And so I auditioned for all these different bands. I auditioned for Cher, but the tall, skinny guy that couldn't play, he got that gig. And I auditioned for Oingo Boingo, but the guy that ended up getting the gig, John Avila, the drummer, was his best friend. So when I did the audition, they wouldn't even give me the time of the day. It's too bad. I would have loved to get that gig. I auditioned for Gino Vanelli, but I didn't have enough body hair. And man, who else did it? And then the capper was I auditioned for Weird Al Yankovic. And it was for a tour opening up for the Monkees on their reunion tour. And I didn't get that gig, so because they wanted someone with a low singing voice and I have a high voice. Whatever.
It's always something, right?
It's something. So I figured I had to do a different track to this whole career in music thing.
Right.
And I got in touch with the people, specifically Cliff Coltrari at Relativity Records, who had signed Steve's Flexible. And they came to see me play at a place called At My Place in Santa Monica, which is funny enough is about 3 blocks from where I currently live when I moved back down there. And they came to see me on my solo shows. And they said, "We love it." Said, "Can you do a record for hardly any money?" And I said, "Well, as long as I get 2 copies, for my mom and sign away half my royalties for my first 3 records, sure, I'd love to."
Yeah.
Hire a lawyer. I'll give you his number, really, before you sign anything. Hire a lawyer.
Right.
Rule number 3, musicians speak. So they gave me a really minuscule budget for the record, and the radio-free album. Great record. And surprisingly enough, I quickly ran out of money. And there was a song, actually the piece that I played coming into this, called Flow My Tears. It's based on the novel by Philip K. Dick about existential neurosis in a postmodern society, but you knew that. And I had written the melody to be played by a muted trumpet, like a Miles kind of thing. So the drummer on the record, Mike Barsamano, was friends with Mark Isham. He's a great trumpet player, great film composer. So I sent the track to Mark Isham, and he agreed to play in it. But besides his fee, whatever that was, he wanted to record it at his own studio, and he needed $50 to pay his engineer.
Okay.
And I didn't have $50.
Right.
And I mean, I don't mean I didn't have $50 in my recording budget to allocate for a secondary recording engineer. I just didn't have $50 to my name.
Sure.
So I called up Cliff at Relativity. I said, I don't know what to do. I've got a couple solos, and I'm out of budget. And he said, we just signed this new guy at Relativity. He's a student of Steve's. How about he plays on your record? He's doing a record. We'll fly up to San Francisco. You play on his record. Do a couple gigs. I said, great. What's his name? Joe Satriani. So I flew up there, and he was just finishing up Surfing at the Alien in Hyde Street Studios. I was supposed to put a fretless track on Always, but we didn't get around to it for one day. And Joe just played brilliantly on Flow My Tears, and got my opening track. I've got Alan Holdsworth and Joe Satriani on the same track on Radio Free.
Yeah, right. That's amazing.
Yeah, so
awesome.
It was great, and then it was just such a great ride from being with Joe and when he really took off and all the exciting times. And I've just been so fortunate to play with so many great guitar players, those two, and Franco Bali. We had a trio with he and Steve Smith, and having Eric Johnson on my record.
Right.
And right now in L.A., I'm doing a lot of work with Carl Verheyen.
Right, he's amazing. He's a friend of Sweetwater. He's been out here. And,
yeah. So we do baked potato gigs, and we've been doing some duo gigs. And there's a guy that can just play the most straight-ahead Delta blues, and then we can whip out, Groovin' High or some bop heads.
Yeah.
So we're going to Europe for like 2 months this fall.
Nice.
And it's great. And I'm just, recently moved back to L.A., was working at a music school there and still teaching and kind of get back in the scene down there. And recording, doing a lot of home recording. I've got a website called tracksbystu.com, and I do a lot of tracks.
Right.
just remotely, in the hotel room and stuff.
Right.
So life is good.
That's great. You have a new instructional video with TrueFire, or a recent one
I
anyway?
have 4, yeah. I have got bass basics and fretboard fitness and the slap and tap thing. And actually, Carl and I and a drummer to be determined are going to be going down and doing this jam along with thing in September.
Oh, great.
Yeah. Where we play tunes, and then if you're a bass player, you can hear me talk about how I interact with the drummer, and you can, play along with just Carl or just me and the drummer. And it's a great thing. It's like, I don't know. It's like the old Jamie Abersong play along with LPs that I had to do.
Right.
It's so interactive, and the guys at TrueFire are great. They have really, Brad and those guys. So it's a good relationship, and I feel real good about those video courses.
That's awesome.
Did I say video?
Video, yes.
What was that?
You didn't say videotape anyway.
No, there you go.
That's right. That's right. So you mentioned drummers, and you've worked with
Right.
some great drummers in the past: Jonathan Mover, Steve Smith.
Right.
I've seen you play a number of times at events like the All Star Guitar Night with I think Danny Gottlieb, was one that you were playing with there. What is it as a bass player that you look for in a drummer, and what allows you to lock in with the way a drummer plays?
Man, they're all so different, and I've been fortunate to play with so many different drummers that now when I write a song, I can sort of write for who's going to be good. There's a guy named Joel Taylor in L.A. that's just a fantastic drummer. I've been playing a lot with a guy named Bobby Rock lately, right? And he's just so fantastic. And we're doing some gigs lately with the Stu Hamm band. And I made a real determination to use Bobby instead of like a fusion guy. Because I remember the first time I met Jeremy Colson, who plays with Vi.
Right.
And it's so funny because I think in jazz, when you're walking, it's sort of the bass player that sets the quarter note, and the drummer kind of gets to lean and move around the time. In fusion, it's a democracy, and everyone's kind of in on the time, right? And the idea is to listen to each other and play off each other. Playing with like guys like Jimmy Colson or Bobby Rock, their job is to keep time, and it's not like they're not listening, but it's the interaction. It's not like they have to copy everything. And when I'm playing some of these rock tunes with Jeremy or with Bobby, man, it's like at the same tempo, it almost feels like it's at halftime. If I'm trying to whip off something difficult like if you've got a drummer who's trying to like cop all that stuff, it adds this tension. But if you've got a drummer that's just playing the time, and it's not gonna waver, it makes some of the harder stuff for more difficult to me seemingly the same tempo, but it feels like it's at half speed.
Kind of frees you up because
It frees me up.
there's that pulse underneath.
And there's so much more space. So drummers that listen, that's the main thing. Sometimes people come up to me and they're playing. They said, "Man, why don't you smile on stage?" I'm like, "Man, I'm working. I'm listening. I'm listening like someone's trying to break into my house, listening to the music, and where I need to go and what I need to do and the space." So, it's just impossible to say. Every drummer has a different way they swing, the way they feel, and I've just been fortunate to play with so many. I did this record. What's the name of it? It's a Varney record, tribute to Jeff Beck. The name of it escapes me. Anyone there know? Great arrangements and fantastic guitar players, Mike Stern and Jeff Richmond and John Schofield and Eric Johnson. Everyone plays on it. And half the record was Vinnie Caliuta, and the other half was Simon Phillips. And let me tell you, that was a lot of fun.
I bet. Yeah,
that was
two
a lot
great
of
drummers.
fun.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So you mentioned listening, and in these interviews, I've talked with a lot of musicians about listening. Is that something that's always come natural to you? Did you realize that was an important thing, or is that something you really focused on developing?
I don't know. I mean, I've coming from to such a musical family, and listening to a lot of music and being involved in so many different aspects of music, and playing. I think the being in the middle school band environments and stuff like that, you're forced to listen. And I've always played. I think there's so many advantages to players today with YouTube. And when you think about it, in my life, when I was born, when I started playing bass, Larry Graham was just starting to do this.
Right.
And maybe someone had done this. And there was like the beginning of Stanley Clarke and the beginning of Jocko. Chris Squire had yet to go. This whole vocabulary that guys, you see these 8-year-old wonderkids that can play all this stuff, that didn't exist when I was born.
Right.
Which was exciting for me to kind of be there as it birthed and hopefully helped it evolve in ways. But the determinant is that as you see some guys that can imitate their players and stand the way they do and get the same squeals out of the whammy bars. But, they forgot that one little thing, which was actually to learn music.
Right.
And part of learning music is playing with other people. And growing up, always being in bands and ensembles. And going to Berkeley, I was always in a top 40 band and wedding bands. People forget that it's the fun. It's not just the chops.
Right.
It's the way the music sounds and playing with other people. And it's never going to be the perfect gig. And you're never going to be good enough. And it's like you're never going to be ready to have kids.
Right.
And you just got to remember that the fun part is just playing music, the fellowship and the energy.
Right.
My daughter, when she was had a brief flirtation with violin, I think she brought it to her third grade talent show, and she played for a class. And I said, "Well, how'd it go, Charlotte?" And she goes, "Well, I was really nervous at first, Dad, but after I played, everyone clapped, and it made me feel really good." And I was like, "Duh." Now you get it.
Yeah, right. Right. So you mentioned all of the things that have come along, in the past 30, 40 years on the bass, and you've driven a lot of that because you have a real chordal approach to what you're doing. When I listen to your playing during the intro music there that you were playing, some of the add 9 chords, and then you're also doing a lot of chordal tapping on top. Where did that come from?
Well, I mean, this is playing solo bass is much different than the role of bass in a band, and hopefully I can do both. And that's what, when I played at All Star Guitar Night a few years ago, Brad Winkles came up to me and said, "Well, you're a really good bass player." Because I got to play blues and I got to play some swing and some different stuff. And a lot of people just know me for this stuff. But I was in a situation a couple of years ago where I had to sight read some Gordon Goodwin big band charts with Arturo Sandoval on trumpet and Greg Field on drums. And, I can swing. Right. I can read.
Sure.
I can play 1/5 and make it sound good and not be bored about it. But given the chance to play solo bass, I played piano, and I'm a big fan of listening to someone play a solo instrument. Glenn Gould, we talked about last night. It's my all-time favorite muse, just an incredible musician. And I had never really considered the electric bass a solo instrument. And then on November 8th, 1978, someone gave me a ticket to see Weather Report at the Orpheum Theater in Boston, and Jocko did a solo, and then suddenly all bets were off.
Right.
So I went home, and I guess the first guy I saw was Victor Bailey, who I was playing with Steve Vai, and these guys are hammering on. And I'm going, okay, well, there's a different note to just go. Oh, okay. Well, look at that. You can actually tap down on the note to get the notes to come out. So then I went to take some of the piano pieces I've been working on, right? Transcribe as much as I could. And the best thing that did for me was that if you play piano, it's easy to see chords laid out.
Right.
But on a 4-string instrument, it's a little different. But playing a piece like that, it made me see the fret harmonically in a whole different way, because there's just a C major root, the roots, and octaves, the third, the fifth, next chord. But there's a D7 with the 7th in the bass. So you really start to see shapes in a different way. And then I was working on some pieces. I tried to do my whole piano repertoire, the Gershwin Prelude No. 2. And I got to the middle. I couldn't play it, but then, okay. Light bulb, right?
Right.
So I just went through my whole classical repertoire, and it's just, when I'm playing solo bass, I'm trying to tell a story. And if your story is, look how fast I can play funk in E, that's a story gets pretty boring after 10 minutes.
Sure.
Right. So from chords and harmonics and different textures, I'm able to hopefully add more interesting vocabulary to my stories.
Sure.
And be able to maybe people laugh or feel melancholy or disgusted and want to leave their seats or whatever.
Whatever the reaction is. Right?
Yeah. It's more colors and more ways to coax some other tunes out of the bass. And again, it's fortunate to live in this age, to be influenced by so many great players, Michael Manring and Stanley and Jeff Berlin and all the people I've gotten to know.
Right.
It's still amazing to me that these guys are like my peers. I had a few weekends ago at Bass Player Live, I was able to, within the space of 2 days, hire Stanley Clark to come to a music school I was working at to give a clinic and introduce him when we're friends. And then the next night, I got to give the speech introducing Chris Squire to get his Lifetime Achievement Award. And
nice.
If you'd ever told me in 1978 that someday, I would have said that's all I ever wanted, was to know these guys. And
right.
to think that I'm even, that we're friends. I'm friends with Stanley, and I'd dare to say peer, but at least in the same sentence.
Well,
so
absolutely.
It's just, I'm still that kid,
Yeah.
looking at the Bass Player magazine, and that's pretty cool.
That's great. Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So we talked a little bit about drummers and the pulse and being free on top of that, but a part of being free as a player is also the equipment that you use.
Yeah.
And you've got this signature bass that you're working with from Washburn. Why don't you tell us what you have going on here?
Well, you know, I had the first relationship I had with Washburn was with the acoustic basses that we'll get to later. But I played them because their sound was so amazingly good, and I played it for years. But the problem, not no one, but I was unable to find an acoustic bass that had an intonatable bridge. And unless you can adjust the action and get it in tune, it was hard for me to play my solo stuff. We'll go a little demo that later. So after we designed that bass, I got to know Terry Atkins and Nick Ellingsworth and the guys there. And so the chance and challenge was to design an electric bass. And one of the things I wanted to do was design a bit lighter bass than I had been playing, because I have a series of playing related injuries, not industries.
Right.
And I also worked closely with Rob Turner at EMG to get the pickup configuration. So this is the US model here. And it's funny because it doesn't have a master volume. What I have is just the prerequisite, of course, J bass, treble and bass controls down here. So if I'm playing just the J bass, I'll boost the bass up a little bit. And then we decided to put the soap bar pickup up by the neck to get more of a real guttural sound.
Sure.
You know, for the pop. And when you combine the two, it brightens up the sound a little bit. And they don't really cancel each other out, so you can have this, add in a little bit of the J. And then I have a piezo, which gives a real wide tone. And if you turn the treble down and the bass up all the way, it gets a real nice. Real fat, like acoustic kind
almost
of
like an
sound.
acoustic bass, yeah.
Yeah, and on the fretless, it really gets close to it.
Yeah.
So this is the U.S. version, and we have 3 versions of the imports that I could talk through. The SB30 has 2 passive pickups.
Okay.
And the SB40, which is a really nice bass, has 2 active pickups. And the 60 has the 2 active pickups with a piezo in them.
Okay.
And they're really fine basses. I'm really happy with the quality of the imports. And
right.
You heard last night, they sound great.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we have a few tricks up our sleeves for the next iteration. But they're really fine quality instruments, the Washburn guys, and I love working with them. And so we're probably going to come up with a 5-string version next year, the 40s, and some different woods. And, so it's been great working with them.
That's awesome. That's awesome. A few other details. You've got a brass nut, it looks like, on there.
I do a brass nut. I can't remember when I started that, but I've always loved it. And, of course, it's got the Buzzy Feet and tuning system in it, which makes a huge difference because as I get older, I become more and more of a tuning freak. In fact, I have a prototype of the True Tempered. Have you seen those, the Swedish company?
No.
With all the curved frets?
Oh, yes, I have, yeah.
They're insane.
Yeah, crazy, right?
Oh, it's great, though. It's your ear is so used to giving up certain intonations, Okay, that's not really in tune, but it's a give and take, and this bass is so in tune that I had talked to some other people that have one, and they've taken it to sessions, and the engineers have said, well, you can't play that. It's actually in tune, and nothing else is. So, but it's fantastic. But the Buzzy thing really does help in the first 4 frets because everything is if you take any bass, tune it and intonate it, it's usually sharp till it gets up to about here.
Right.
And a sharp bass really makes things tense, which is another reason why I always tune about 2 cents flat, just to make everything kind of sit and lay a little bit.
Right. You've got the D-tuner as well.
Oh, I do. That, this comes from one of my first basses that people knew me was the Kubicki X Factor.
Mm-hmm.
And Phil passed away about 6 months ago, and actually next month we're having a wonderful remembrance of him on what would have been his 70th birthday.
Nice.
In Santa Barbara. And what a great guy Phil Kubicki was, and what an innovator. And he developed this bass called the X Factor, where if you remember the tuning mechanisms were down
back,
here.
yeah.
And it had, which was like a classical extension, it had a functional headstock, unlike a Steinbrenner, where the E string, the ball end of it was here. And it had a capo on where it would have been this fret. And if you let the capo go, you would actually have 2 extra frets.
Right.
The great thing is then if you let it up, you could finger an E flat, and finger a D. Now, the hip shot helps you can tune it down to whatever you want.
Mm-hmm.
But I've tuned it down to D. That's better. It lets me work, but of course the problem is you have to play octaves like minor sevenths. So if I try to play some of the songs, and then you go to the tapping part, I've got to play some like octaves and some minor sevenths, and I'm not Michael Mannering. I'm not that smart, where I can have hip shots on all 4 strings and down
on the
here.
bridge, yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Craziness.
He's such a wonderful player. But I get so used to it. And also it lets me get down there. I do play 5-string when I have to, but I'm most comfortable in 4, and it lets me get only a minor third away.
Sure.
So yeah, Dave Borisoff. I don't know. So thankful for what he invented, and I love the stuff. So it helps me get down there.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Nice. Nice. So this is the acoustic bass?
This is.
Interesting, with the 4 separate bridge pieces.
Absolutely. And again, the concept behind this was that most acoustic basses that I saw, I love the sounds, but if you can't change the action, number one, it's just, I don't know, maybe I'm just getting old and set my ways, but how can you have a guitar or a bass where you can't set the action?
Right.
The neck warps and
everything changes.
Everything changes. And especially for me, it's the intonation, where if there's no way to get this in tune with this, it's just going to be impossible for me to play any of my solo stuff on it.
Sure.
So, and it keeps the resonance of the big low notes. But you can be in tune up there. And the thing I really like about the piezos is they're so non-compressed. They're so touch sensitive, where you can play it lightly like this. It's going to be full. But if you snap it,
right.
Some active pickups tend to add compression and squash it, but these, and especially a lot of the EMGs, the new ones, they really let you play with a lot of dynamics, and especially my solo playing dynamics are just so important to make the songs interesting.
Yeah.
So.
Well, these have the dynamics, but they don't have that quackiness.
Yeah.
That a lot of them have. It's a nice round tone that sounds real.
Well, we worked hard, and especially the real challenges was on the electrics.
Mm-hmm.
And when we first put it in, it sounded a little bit clacky, but man, they sound, well, you heard it, it sounds just great. So it's just nice to have a campfire bass that I can play, and look, play that, and it's in tune.
It's in tune.
And when it's in tune, I'm a happy guy.
Nice. Stu, thanks for coming in.
My pleasure, man.
Such a pleasure having you here and listening to your playing.
All right, man. And thanks to everyone here in Sweetwater. It's great to get back to the Midwest, and we're working on a few other things, so I'm sure I'll see you guys back here.
Hope you'll be back soon.
I will.
We'd love it. We'd love it.
All right, man.
Awesome.
Thank you.
I'm Mitch Gallagher. Thanks for joining me for the Sweetwater Minute.